Daniel had always believed that humor was the fastest way to break tension. On the human outpost stationed near the edge of Coalition space, he often used jokes to lighten the mood. Traders, explorers, and soldiers from many alien worlds gathered here, and the place was full of people who took themselves far too seriously. Daniel thought of himself as the kind of man who could ease the atmosphere with a laugh. But that day he discovered how fragile humor could be in the wrong setting. The Coalition outpost was busy as usual. Long corridors hummed with the sound of engines, and the air carried a faint metallic tang. Daniel had been assigned to assist in trade discussions with a delegation from the Yalthine, a tall and imposing species known for their strength and discipline. He had never spoken to one up close, and when the group entered the chamber, his eyes widened. Their armor gleamed like polished stone, and their height made even the tallest humans look small. At their front was a woman who stood straighter than the rest. Her eyes shone a pale silver, and her movements were calm but powerful, as if every step carried the weight of centuries. Her name, spoken by the translator device, was Sira. Daniel had felt nervous, and his natural instinct when nervous was to joke. He glanced at her broad shoulders, the way her armor curved around her form, and before he thought twice, he spoke in a tone far too casual for the moment. "I hope you don't bump your head on our doorways," he said with a grin. They weren't built for someone with that much body. The words echoed louder than he intended. The chamber went silent. The other Yalthine shifted uncomfortably, and even the human officers at the table glanced at him in shock. Daniel felt his stomach drop. He realized too late that what had been meant as a harmless tease sounded like he had mocked her very being. He braced himself for anger, expecting her to lash out, to call him disrespectful. But Sira did not flare in rage. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes studying him with a strange calmness. Her lips curved, not quite into a smile, but into something thoughtful. "Your words," she said through the translator, "are unusual." Her voice was deep, carrying a weight that made even casual speech sound ceremonial. Few would speak in such a way. Fewer still would dare. Daniel blinked, unsure whether he had just insulted her or intrigued her. He started to stammer an apology, but she raised a hand, silencing him without force. "You do not fear truth," she continued. "You see my body and speak of it plainly. Among my kind, such things are never spoken aloud. We treat the body as a sacred gift, not to be mocked or praised. Yet you jest and you do not fall silent when others grow tense. Why?" Daniel opened his mouth, closed it, then finally spoke. "Because sometimes laughter makes things easier. I wasn't trying to offend you. I just thought, I thought it might make this feel less formal." Her eyes remained on him for a long time, so steady he felt as if she could see every thought in his head. Then, in the faintest hint of amusement, she said, "Strange. You mean no harm, yet you speak with boldness. Perhaps there is something to learn from this." She turned back to the trade discussion as if nothing had happened, but Daniel felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. He had expected anger, maybe even punishment, but what he received instead was curiosity. And that curiosity unsettled him more than any threat could have. After the meeting ended, Daniel tried to slip away, hoping to avoid further embarrassment. But Sira found him in the corridor. She walked with quiet strength, each step steady and unhurried. Yet her presence filled the space like thunderclouds. He swallowed nervously when she stopped in front of him. "You are bold, human," she said. "Too bold, some would say. But I am not offended. I am intrigued." Daniel blinked, unsure how to answer. "Intrigued? By me? I was just making a dumb joke." "To speak of the body is no joke among the Yalthine," she replied. "It is a line no one crosses. But you crossed it without fear. And still, you did not mean disrespect. You are either foolish or honest. Perhaps both." There was something almost like humor in her tone now, though it was hard to tell. Her people's expressions were subtle, their emotions hidden in small gestures rather than broad smiles. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck, embarrassed. "I guess I'm a bit of both. Foolish and honest." Sira studied him once more before giving a single nod. "Then let us see which you are more of. Foolishness fades quickly. Honesty remains." With that, she turned and walked away, leaving Daniel standing in the corridor with his heart pounding. As he watched her disappear into the crowd, he realized something strange. He had not only avoided offending her, he had somehow opened a door. What kind of door he did not yet know. but he sensed that his careless joke had set something in motion that would change his life in ways he could not imagine. Daniel spent the next day trying to forget about his embarrassing attempt at humor, but the memory refused to leave his mind. Every time he passed through the outpost corridors, he imagined the silent stares of the aliens who had heard his words. He kept telling himself that maybe Sira had truly not been offended. Still, the thought of her silver eyes fixed on him lingered, and he could not stop wondering why she had called him intriguing. The outpost was always crowded, filled with humans and aliens trading goods, sharing news, or preparing for missions. But despite the chaos, Sira was easy to notice. She moved like a shadow among the others, tall and commanding. People stepped aside when she walked by, even without her asking. Daniel admired the discipline in her movements. Everything about her seemed deliberate, as if she carried the weight of her ancestors with every step. He doubted she even noticed him. That assumption shattered when he left the mess hall later that evening. He carried a tray of food back to his station, his mind full of dull paperwork waiting for him. Suddenly, the corridor fell quiet. He turned and saw Sira approaching. She was not wearing her ceremonial armor, but a lighter suit of dark cloth, though even without the armor, her height and strength were obvious. Daniel froze, his tray almost slipping from his hands. "You," she said, her voice steady. "Walk with me." Daniel blinked. Me?" She nodded, waiting patiently. He hesitated, but finally set his tray on a bench and followed her. They moved down the long corridor, her pace slow yet unrelenting. He noticed the way others stopped talking as she passed. He felt both important and nervous at the same time. After a while, she spoke. "Yesterday, you spoke of my body as though it were an ordinary thing. Do you know what that means to my people?" Daniel swallowed. "I think I offended you. I'm sorry for that." Her gaze slid toward him. "No. Offense is easy to take, easy to give. What you did is different. Among the Yalthine, the body is sacred. We honor it in silence, not in words. To speak of it is to question our strength, our ancestors, and the reason we exist. Even praise is forbidden. And yet you, a human with no knowledge of our traditions, spoke freely without hesitation. Tell me, why?" Daniel rubbed his neck, embarrassed. "Because I didn't know your rules. Where I come from, we joke to make friends. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I guess I thought it would make you laugh or at least feel less distant. I didn't mean anything disrespectful." Sira was silent for a long moment, then she stopped walking. They were in a quiet section of the outpost, where the humming of machinery filled the air. She faced him, her silver eyes reflecting the dim lights. "You did not know, and yet you spoke. This shows two things. Either you are careless, or you are honest. If you are careless, then you are dangerous. If you are honest, then you are rare. I wish to know which you are." Daniel frowned, unsure how to answer. "How exactly do I prove that?" Her lips curved slightly, a gesture that might have been her version of a smile. "You must learn. You must see my people as they are, not as you imagine them. If you wish to speak of us again, you must first understand us. That is my challenge to you." Daniel raised his eyebrows. "You want me to study your people? Why me? I'm just a junior officer. There are scientists and diplomats far better suited." "Because they are careful," Sira replied. "They choose every word, fearing mistakes. But you are different. You speak without fear. That makes you dangerous, but also valuable. I would rather have a human who dares speak the wrong truth than one who hides behind polite silence. Will you accept my challenge?" Daniel felt a strange mix of pride and dread. He had never thought his clumsy joke would lead to something like this. But as he looked at her serious expression, he realized this was more than curiosity. She was testing him, measuring him. A refusal would close the door forever. "I'll accept," he said finally, his voice firmer than he expected. "But don't expect me to get everything right. I'm not great at formal stuff." Her head tilted slightly again. "Perfection is not required. Honesty is." She began walking once more, and he followed. Over the next week, Daniel spent more time around Sira than he thought possible. She showed him pieces of Yalthine culture he had never seen before. Ritual exercises they performed daily, the way they trained their bodies not just for strength but as a way of remembering their history. Each movement told a story, a memory passed down from ancestors who had survived ancient wars. At first, Daniel was clumsy. He tripped, stumbled, and struggled to keep up. But Sira never mocked him. Instead, she watched with quiet patience, offering correction when needed. Slowly, he began to understand. Her people were not strong simply because of biology. They were strong because every action, every motion of their body carried meaning. Their bodies were their history, their identity. One evening after training, Sira looked at him and said, "You see now why the body is sacred. It is not just flesh, it is memory. To jest about it is to jest about all who came before." Daniel nodded, breathing hard from exhaustion. "I get it. I really do. But maybe, sometimes laughter can be another kind of respect, not to dishonor the past, but to remind us we're alive now." For the first time, Sira's silver eyes softened in a way Daniel could recognize as warmth. "Perhaps. That is what I wish to learn from you." Daniel realized then that what had begun as a careless tease was becoming something far deeper. He was no longer just a nervous human officer trying to break the ice. He was part of an exchange, one that might change how two species saw each other forever. The days passed, and Daniel's life on the outpost began to change in ways he had not expected. Before, his routine had been simple: reports, shifts, patrols, and the occasional meal shared with fellow officers. But now, with Sira's challenge in place, his evenings were spent learning from her. At first, he had thought it would be a cultural lesson, full of lectures and history. Instead, he found himself pulled into something far more physical and demanding. Sira introduced him to Yalthine training rituals. They were not like the human exercises he was used to, where lifting weights and running were the main focus. Every move she taught him seemed to have purpose, each stretch and strike representing some part of her people's history. She explained in her steady voice that her ancestors had been shaped in times of war. Their bodies were the record of survival, and to move as they did was to honor that memory. Daniel tried to copy her movements, but his human body felt clumsy compared to her grace. She would balance on one leg while holding her arms in precise angles, her breathing controlled, her muscles steady as stone. He, on the other hand, wobbled and fell more times than he could count. Still, Sira never scolded him. Instead, she corrected his posture with calm words, her tone never sharp, always patient. "You are too focused on strength," she told him one night as he struggled to lift a heavy training stone. "Your people measure the body by how much weight it can carry. But strength is not just muscle. Strength is memory. Each movement must carry meaning or it is wasted." Daniel grunted, sweat dripping down his face. "Meaning doesn't help when this thing is crushing my arms." For the first time, he thought he saw her lips twitch in something like amusement. "Then perhaps your meaning is survival," she said. "A worthy meaning." The more time they spent together, the more Daniel began to understand why Sira had been intrigued by his words. He had always thought of the body as just a body, something that could be improved or laughed about. But to Sira, it was more than that. It was the story of her people written in flesh and bone. He realized then that when he had teased her, he had unknowingly touched upon the deepest part of her identity. One evening, after a long day of training, Sira decided to show him something outside the outpost. They walked to the edge of the settlement where the metal walls gave way to the rocky plains of the planet. The sky glowed a deep violet and two moons hung above like watchful eyes. Sira stepped onto the open ground, removed her cloak, and began to move. Daniel stood silent as he watched. Her body flowed with impossible precision, every gesture powerful yet graceful. She struck the air with her fists, turned sharply, then dropped into low stances that seemed both martial and ceremonial. Dust rose around her feet as she moved faster, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. When she finished, she stood still, her breathing calm despite the intensity of her movements. Daniel could only clap slowly, shaking his head in awe. "That was incredible. Like a dance, but also a fight," Sira nodded. "It is both. Our ancestors fought wars that nearly destroyed us. They built our bodies to endure, but they gave us this ritual to remember. Every strike tells of a battle, every step recalls survival. This is why we do not speak lightly of the body. It is more than muscle, it is history alive." Daniel felt humbled. "And I just joked about it. No wonder everyone glared at me." "Yet you did not mean insult," she said softly. "And that is why I speak with you still. You saw what others do not. You treated me not as a symbol, but as a person. Even in clumsy jest there was truth." Daniel looked at her with new respect. He realized she had trusted him with something no outsider had seen. The thought made him uneasy, but also proud. "You know," he said quietly, "humans also carry memories. We don't write them in our bodies the same way, but we pass stories through families, through laughter and tears. Maybe we're not so different. Sira studied him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. Perhaps. Your people honor memory with words, mine honor it with motion. Both are valid. Both are strength. Their conversation ended there, but something had shifted between them. Daniel no longer felt like a foolish officer who had made a mistake. He felt like he had been invited into a secret, a truth that few humans would ever be allowed to touch. The following days only deepened this bond. During one training session, when Daniel nearly collapsed from exhaustion, Sira placed her strong hand on his shoulder. "You have spirit," she said. "Your body may fail, but your will does not. This is what makes your people dangerous. You endure not with design, but with choice." Daniel panted, managing a tired smile. "So, am I passing your test yet?" Her silver eyes softened just slightly. "You are learning. That is enough." For the first time, Daniel felt proud not just of himself, but of what he represented. He had thought humans were the weaker species compared to giants like the Yalthine. But Sira was teaching him that strength came in many forms, and sometimes the smallest spark of human stubbornness could shine brighter than muscle or memory. And though he did not realize it yet, this lesson would be tested far sooner than he expected. The outpost had always been busy but predictable. Ships came and went, traders argued about prices, and soldiers kept watch on the docking bays. Daniel had grown used to the routine, and even the strangeness of Sira's training sessions was starting to feel normal. But one quiet night, everything changed. The first sign came as a low alarm that echoed through the corridors. Daniel, who had just finished recording a report, paused in confusion. The alarms were not the usual drills. The red lights flashing above told him this was real. He rushed into the hall where others were already moving quickly toward defensive positions. A message came over the loudspeaker. "Unidentified ships detected. All personnel prepare for potential attack." Daniel's heart pounded as he hurried to the docking bay. He had heard stories about pirates and rogue factions in this region of space, but he had never faced them himself. As he arrived, he saw Sira already there with several Yalthine warriors. She stood tall, calm as ever, her silver eyes fixed on the sealed doors. When she noticed Daniel, she gave a small nod. "They will test us soon," she said. "Be ready." He swallowed hard. "Do you think they'll try to board?" "They will not announce themselves if peace is their goal," she replied. The answer came quickly. The outpost shook with the impact of weapons fire. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the docking bay doors groaned as if under pressure. People shouted orders, scrambling to secure barricades. Daniel grabbed a rifle from the weapons locker, his hands shaking slightly. He had trained for this, but training and reality were very different things. The first explosion tore open part of the outer wall, and alien raiders poured inside. They were smaller than the Yalthine, but fast and vicious. Their armor patched together from scavenged metal. Energy weapons lit the air as defenders fired back. Daniel ducked behind cover, firing carefully while trying not to panic. Beside him, Sira moved forward with steady precision. She carried no rifle but fought with a long staff that crackled with energy. Her body seemed unstoppable as she blocked incoming fire, swung the staff with incredible force, and knocked raiders to the ground. Her movements were the same ones Daniel had seen in her rituals, only now they were not ceremony but survival. At one point, a raider aimed at Daniel from the side. He froze, knowing he would not react in time. But Sira moved faster than thought. She stepped between him and the shot, her armored body taking the blast. The bolt left a scorch mark on her shoulder, but she did not slow. She struck the attacker down in a single motion. Daniel's heart raced as he realized she had saved his life without hesitation. He fired more carefully after that, covering her flank as best he could. Together, they pushed back against the invaders step by step. The battle spread through the outpost, alarms wailing everywhere. Smoke filled the corridors, and the air stank of burnt metal. Daniel and Sira fought side by side, each protecting the other. Daniel noticed how she used her body like a shield, standing tall even when blasts struck her armor. And in return, he used his quick thinking to close off routes, reroute power to doors, and set up traps that slowed the attackers. At one point, they reached a junction where a group of civilians were trapped behind a sealed door. The raiders were trying to break through. Daniel looked around desperately. "We can't hold them off alone!" Sira's silver eyes narrowed. "Then we do not hold. We strike." With a roar that shook the hall, she charged forward, her staff spinning in arcs of blue energy. Daniel followed, firing his rifle in short bursts. The raiders were caught off guard by the sudden assault, and within moments the corridor was clear. The civilians behind the door stared in shock when Daniel managed to open it. He urged them to escape while they could. As the fight dragged on, Daniel felt his muscles burn and his arms grow heavy. Yet every time he wanted to give up, he looked at Sira. Her movements never faltered, her strength never seemed to waver. She was like a living wall, unbreakable, and he drew courage from her presence. Finally, after what felt like hours, the alarms shifted tone. Reinforcements had arrived. Coalition ships had driven the raiders back into space. The remaining attackers fled, leaving only silence and smoke behind. Daniel sank against the wall, exhausted, his chest heaving. Sira stood nearby, her staff resting against her shoulder, her armor scorched, but her stance unbroken. She looked down at him with calm eyes. "You fought well, Daniel." He let out a shaky laugh. "I thought I was going to die at least 10 times. But we made it." She gave a small nod. "You endured. That is what matters. You were not only brave, you were clever. Your quick action saved many lives." Daniel felt a surge of pride at her words. "And you saved mine. More than once. I don't know how you do it. You make it look easy." "It is not easy," she replied. "It is memory. Every move I make carries the strength of those who came before. But you, Daniel, your strength comes from choice. That is why I value it." As the repair crews began to work and the smoke cleared, Daniel realized something important. His connection with Sira had changed. They were no longer student and teacher. They were partners bound by battle. And deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning of something far larger than either of them could see. The outpost was quiet in the days after the attack. Repairs were underway, scorched walls were being patched, and damaged systems slowly came back online. The smell of burnt metal still lingered, and the memory of alarms haunted the corridors. But for Daniel, the silence after the storm felt strange. He kept replaying the battle in his head, remembering the moments when he had thought it was over, and the moments when Sira had stood like an unshakable wall between him and death. He found himself thinking of her more often than before. It wasn't only because she had saved his life. It was the way she fought, the way she carried herself, and the way she looked at him afterward. Not as a weak human she had protected, but as a partner who had stood beside her. That thought gave him pride, but it also filled him with questions. One evening, Daniel walked to the edge of the outpost where the reinforced windows looked out into the endless stars. He leaned against the railing, trying to clear his mind. He didn't notice Sira until her reflection appeared beside his in the glass. She had approached silently, as she always did. "You avoid the others," she said calmly. Daniel turned to her. "I guess I needed space. Everyone keeps talking about how close we came to losing everything. It's hard to forget." Sira nodded slowly. "Battle leaves marks not only on walls and bodies, but on the mind. Among my people, we share those marks so that none carry them alone." Daniel hesitated. "Is that why you came to find me?" Her silver eyes studied him with quiet intensity. "Yes, you fought well. But I saw fear in you. That fear troubles you now." He let out a weak laugh. "Of course I was afraid. I thought I was done for half the time. If you hadn't been there—" He stopped, his throat tightening. Sira tilted her head slightly. "Fear is not weakness, Daniel. It is the reminder that you still value life. Many of my kind do not admit it, but even we feel fear. The difference is how we act despite it." Her words gave him a strange comfort. He leaned back on the railing and looked at her. "You know, I've been wanting to say this. I'm sorry again for the way I teased you that first day. It was stupid. I didn't understand what your body meant to you or to your people, but now after fighting beside you, I see it. It's not just strength. It's history, like you said, and I respect that." For a moment, Sira was silent. Then she surprised him with a soft laugh, low and almost musical. "Do you know what I have realized, Daniel? Your clumsy words were not an insult. They were a gift." He blinked in confusion. "A gift? How is teasing someone a gift?" "Because," she explained, "for the first time I saw myself not as a sacred symbol but as something simple, something alive. You did not place me above you. You treated me as another being, flawed and strong in equal measure. That is why I listened to you, why I chose to teach you. Your humor, though awkward, opened a door." Daniel felt stunned. "I never thought of it that way. I was just trying to break the ice. But if it helped you, Then I'm glad. Sira's eyes softened in a way he rarely saw. It helped more than you know. Among my people, we do not laugh at ourselves. We do not question our traditions, but you laugh even in danger, even in failure. It is strange, but it is powerful. It shows that strength is not only in the body, but also in the spirit. Daniel smiled faintly. You make it sound like humans are special. But most of us are just stumbling through life, trying not to mess up. And yet, she replied, you endure. You stumble, you fall, but you rise again. That is strength my people do not always understand. You have shown me another way to see myself. They stood in silence for a while, gazing at the stars. Daniel felt a warmth in his chest he could not explain. The bond between them had grown beyond teacher and student, beyond warrior and ally. It was something deeper, built on honesty and survival, on laughter and truth. Finally, Daniel spoke. You know, when I first saw you, I thought I'd never be able to talk to you like this. You seem so far above me, so untouchable. But now, I feel like I can tell you anything. Sira's lips curved in that faint, almost smile. Then tell me this, what do you see when you look at me now? Daniel hesitated, then answered honestly. I see a friend, a partner, someone I trust more than anyone else on this outpost. For the first time, Sira's expression shifted into something he could clearly read as warmth. Then we have both learned something valuable. I have learned to see myself through your eyes, and you have learned the weight of what I carry. Together we are stronger than apart. The silence that followed was not heavy but peaceful. Daniel felt the tension in his chest ease. He no longer carried the fear alone, and he no longer felt like the clumsy officer who had made a mistake. He was part of something bigger, a connection that reached beyond species, beyond culture. As the stars burned quietly outside the window, Daniel realized that the smallest words, spoken in foolish honesty, had brought him to this moment. And though he could not see the future, he knew it was forever changed. The outpost slowly returned to its normal rhythm after the repairs were complete. Soldiers trained again in the yards, engineers tested the systems, and traders resumed their small exchanges with other colonies. Yet something lingered in the air, an invisible tension that everyone could feel. The attack had shaken their trust in safety, and whispers about another possible strike passed through the halls like cold wind. Daniel noticed how people looked at Sira differently after the battle. Before, she had been a silent presence, respected for her alien heritage but never truly understood. Now the crew spoke of her with admiration, almost fear. They called her the shield of the outpost, the one who had stood unbroken when the walls nearly fell. But Sira herself seemed unchanged. She walked the halls with the same calm stride, eyes distant as if carrying thoughts too heavy to share. Daniel tried to read her mood, but she gave little away, until one night, when a meeting was called in the Great Hall. The commander wanted every member of the outpost present. Rumors spread quickly. Some said new enemies were on the move. Others whispered about reinforcements. Daniel sat among the crowd, restless, until Sira entered. She wore her ceremonial armor, polished and gleaming under the lights. It wasn't her usual training gear. This armor carried symbols etched into its plates, symbols Daniel had never seen before. The room grew silent as she stepped to the front. The commander gave a short introduction, but it was clear this meeting belonged to her. Sira's voice carried strength as she began. When I first came here, I was sent as an observer. My people wished to study the humans, to measure their worth in the trials of survival. I was not meant to interfere beyond guidance. She paused, her silver eyes sweeping the room. But that has changed. A murmur moved through the crowd. Daniel leaned forward, his heart racing. I fought beside you, Sira continued. I saw fear and courage mixed together. I saw weakness, but also a strength my people do not understand. The strength to rise even after falling. And I realized that to stand apart was no longer possible for me. I choose to fight with you, not as an observer, but as one of you. Her words fell like a stone into still water, sending ripples through every listener. For her kind, Daniel knew, choosing to abandon the observer's role was no small decision. It was rebellion against her own traditions. The commander spoke carefully. Sira, you understand the weight of what you say? To declare yourself part of this outpost, to fight as one of us, it means breaking ties with your people. Sira nodded, calm but firm. I understand. But my path is no longer with their silence. It is with your voices, your laughter, your defiance in the face of despair. This outpost is my home now. The crowd erupted with mixed voices. Some cheered openly, grateful for her loyalty. Others whispered with doubt, unsure if they could trust such a bold declaration. Daniel felt his chest tighten with pride. She had chosen them, chosen him, not because of duty but because she believed in what they stood for. As the meeting ended, Daniel followed her into the corridor. The voices of the others echoed behind them, but here it was quiet. He walked beside her, searching for the right words. That was brave, he said at last. She tilted her head slightly. You think so? Of course, Daniel answered. You just gave up your place with your people. That can't be easy. Her gaze softened. It is not easy. But I realize something, Daniel. The path of my people is bound by chains of tradition. Yours is uncertain, full of mistakes, but alive. And it was your foolish teasing that first showed me how to break those chains. Do you see now? That moment has shaped everything that followed. Daniel laughed quietly, shaking his head. I never thought a stupid joke would lead to this. Humor is never small, Sira said. It reminds us that even in darkness there is light. That is why I stand with you. That is why I will fight for this outpost until my last breath. They stopped at the observation window, where the stars stretched endless and cold. Daniel felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. She wasn't just an ally now. She was part of their future, a bridge between worlds. You know, Daniel said softly. The others may not understand it yet, but this changes everything. You've just shown them that even someone raised to follow tradition can choose a new way. That's inspiring. Sira looked at him with calm certainty, then let it inspire. For storms are coming, Daniel. The enemies who attacked us will return and others may follow. If they believe we are weak, they will press harder. We must be ready, together. Daniel nodded slowly. He could see the truth in her eyes. But instead of fear, he felt something stronger rising within him, hope. If they could stand together, if they could face the storm as one, maybe they had a chance. And as the stars burned brightly beyond the glass, Daniel realized that the story of their bond was no longer just about a joke made in ignorance. It had become a story of choice, of unity, and of a future reshaped by trust. The following week was tense. Word of Sira's declaration had spread beyond the outpost, and Daniel could feel the eyes of allies and visitors alike on him wherever he went. There were whispers of admiration, but also doubt. Some wondered if the Yalthine woman could truly abandon her traditions without consequences. Others worried that her loyalty to humanity might bring unforeseen dangers. Daniel, however, was focused on something simpler, preparing for the inevitable threat that had always loomed near the edges of space. A sudden alarm shattered the quiet. The sensors had picked up multiple enemy ships approaching at high speed. Daniel grabbed his rifle and ran to the docking bay where Sira was already waiting, her armor gleaming and her staff in hand. Her silver eyes met his, calm and steady, and for the first time he felt the full weight of their shared responsibility. They are stronger this time, Sira said quietly. They will test not only the outpost but us. Daniel nodded, feeling both fear and determination rise together. Then we'll make sure they regret it. The first wave of attackers struck with precision. Explosions rocked the docking bay and energy blasts cut across the walls. Daniel fired rapidly, keeping his aim steady while Sira moved with incredible grace, deflecting attacks and striking down intruders before they could reach him. Unlike before, this battle was larger and more coordinated, and Daniel realized they could not rely on brute force alone. They had to work together as one. Stay close, Sira shouted over the noise. Daniel moved beside her, ducking under a blast and returning fire at a raider charging from the side. Sira's staff met his eye line, a signal he had learned to read. She would take the lead and he would follow. They fell into a rhythm, each action complementing the other. Where Daniel's aim faltered, Sira's speed compensated. Where she was engaged with multiple enemies, Daniel's quick thinking provided cover and distraction. In the chaos, Daniel caught glimpses of civilians fleeing through secured corridors. He realized that every move they made was not only for survival, but to protect others. The weight of responsibility was heavy, but it fueled their resolve. At one point, a massive raider leapt toward Daniel from above. He froze and time seemed to slow. Sira reacted instantly, spinning her staff in a wide arc that knocked the attacker back before it could land. Daniel barely caught his balance, heart racing. "Thanks," he shouted, and she nodded without looking away from the next threat. The battle raged on, but slowly the tide turned. Daniel and Sira moved together seamlessly, a unit neither human nor Yalthine alone could have achieved. Each enemy defeated strengthened their confidence. Daniel realized that the lessons Sira had taught him about her people, the rituals, the history, the connection between body and spirit, were guiding him now in ways he never expected. Finally, the last of the attackers fell back, retreating into space. Smoke filled the docking bay, but the outpost remained standing. Daniel dropped to his knees, exhausted, and looked around. Sira stood nearby, unbroken, her staff resting against her shoulder, her armor scorched but still solid. She turned to him and gave the faintest curve of her lips, a gesture Daniel recognized as approval. "You fought well," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "You too," Daniel replied, his voice hoarse. "I don't know how you do it. You make everything look simple." "Nothing is simple," she said. "But when one trusts another, the impossible becomes possible. Today you trusted me and I trusted you. That is why we survived." Daniel felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. He realized that their bond had become more than friendship. It was a connection of respect, trust, and shared strength. The initial teasing, the lessons, the battles, they had all built toward this moment. Later, as the outpost repaired and life slowly returned to normal, Daniel and Sira stood together on the observation deck, watching the stars stretch endlessly above. He turned to her. "I never thought a dumb joke could lead to this, but I guess it did. You chose to trust me, to teach me, to fight with me, and I wouldn't change a thing." Sira's silver eyes softened. "Then remember this, Daniel. Small actions, even foolish ones, can shape great outcomes. A single word, a laugh, or a choice made without fear can change more than you imagine. That is why we are here together and why we will continue forward, stronger than ever." Daniel smiled faintly. "I think I understand now. Strength isn't just about muscle or armor or battles. It's about trust. It's about courage in the small moments as much as in the big ones." Sira nodded, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "And that is what humans bring to the galaxy. Courage, humor, honesty. All things my people have seldom seen. All things that have made us stronger together." For the first time, Daniel felt a calm certainty. The outpost, the battles, the countless dangers, they were all part of a larger story, one that he had helped shape. And at the center of it stood Sira, no longer untouchable but fully present, fully a partner. As they stood together under the cold glow of distant stars, Daniel realized that the story that had begun with a foolish joke had become a story of trust, strength, and unity. The galaxy around them was vast and uncertain, but with allies like Sira, he knew they could face whatever came next, and that realization filled him with a quiet, enduring hope.